And tell us your name, please.
My name is Phyllis Hauser.
Yes, ma'am.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you, Reverend Patterson, and thank you, Judge Perkins, for loving the children along with us. Thank you so much for what you're doing for us. So anyway, on January 12th, a date I'll never forget for the rest of my life, my husband and I were actually at one of our rental properties trying to get it ready for rent. And I do the cleaning, he does a lot of the maintenance stuff, so he was doing it. I left. I called the superintendent to see if we were gonna let out early, because I had a parent to call me. He got back to me, he was like, no, we're gonna stick it out here, which was the best thing to happen, you know. Your granddaughter were in the bed, looking out the big bay window, singing, "A rose is still a rose, baby girl, you're still a flower." Then I heard my husband's truck come. We were just singing. So he came in, walked to the back, and he came back. He was like, "Y'all, we got to take cover. It's coming. I hear it coming." We were singing, didn't even realize how bad it was. We all went into the bathroom, felt the shaking, heard the glass break, felt the shaking. We were just fine. My husband went out. My daughter was going out with him. I was like, "Hey, where are you going? You got a 2-year-old baby. Don't go out there." She was like, "I'm going with my daddy." I was like, "Well, I don't want to be the parent of a 2-year-old child," you know, just thinking. Well, anyway, we didn't panic. None of that upset us at all. We knew we had been hit by the tornado because we heard the glass break in my bedroom. Didn't realize a tree had fallen in our home until we walked out. Thank God we were not traumatized by the actual impact. But we immediately went into rescue mode because I have a lot of elderly people in my neighborhood. So me and my husband checked on everybody, and we were checking on a neighbor who had been deceased for a couple of years. Because my mind was just rescue. We got to help people. We were getting wheelbarrows, rolling people out of their homes who were stuck. We were in total rescue mode. So we have a rental property across town. It took my husband probably 3 hours to get there, trying to avoid wires and everything to try to help those people, but we did. And my sister, so my car was trapped, my daughter's car was totaled, we didn't have transportation or anything. I worked with the state troopers. Aaliyah sent troopers to get me and help me, and I was like, "Come on, if y'all come to help me, y'all gotta work with people." So I had them rescuing people with me. We did that, and about 6 hours later, after everything had settled and we went to try to get a hotel, and they told us everything was booked, that's when reality set in, that we were homeless, that we were displaced. We went to Prattville. It's the only place we could go. We stayed there for a week, and one of my husband's coworkers donated a hotel in Montgomery, so we were there. And as I stated, the hardest part about it was not knowing where you're gonna put your toothbrush. So I went to Dollar General and just started buying a whole bunch of cheap toothbrushes because I didn't know, you know, where you're gonna brush your teeth and stuff. But fortunately, you know, and we too have insurance. It's been a process. We're waiting on our check too. We don't have anything yet, but we're just waiting. And but when I thought of PTSD, I thought about military and law enforcement, but it's real. Part of mine was seeing that tree in my house. I couldn't get, all the people were here helping everybody, and I appreciated that. Nobody could help me. I mean, I could, and even people I was willing to pay, they didn't have the equipment. Finally, a man from Andalusia was able to help me get the tree out of my home because of the way it fell on my home. So April would have made 27 years that I was in my house. I raised my children there, and I was raising my grandchildren. I'm retiring this year from my job. My husband has 4 years, so we weren't in like a major hurry to move. We knew eventually we would start looking, but we've been put in a position to where we got to figure out if we're gonna rebuild where we are and we love our home, or if we're gonna try to relocate. But it's been an experience, and I too have been helping. And I can share this, Pastor Patterson can tell you, I was helping so much, and I still do. One of my church members, she didn't know I had been affected because I was just helping. I mean, because that's what you do. You have to help people. So I'm not woe is me. I'm still helping people, mostly financially because I work in Tuscaloosa. come back, do what I can, but we just need prayer, and so we're gonna be good. Let me just say this: my 2-year-old granddaughter, she didn't know. Like I said, we weren't traumatized by it, so she didn't have any nightmares or anything. But she said, "Daddy, I got to fix my house." So she think my husband can fix anything, so she just wants her granddaddy to fix her house. So, and he's working on it. He's almost got her apartment together. So, but anyway, that's my experience with the tornado.
Yes, and I just think each one of you have more. I invited more people, but I didn't recognize anyone because of the crowd.
Reverend Patterson, hold on real quick.
Okay.
Just give me 1 second, because we have somebody else very important over here.
Okay.
Real quick. Ma'am, what do you want to, Malika said you wanted to share your story. Can you tell us your story?
I will. You want me to just sit? I can sit down? Well, praise the Lord, everybody.
Praise the Lord.
I am Evangelist Mary P. Smiley, and I would just like to tell how the Lord can save us in the midst of storms.
Yes, He did.
I remember when I was a little girl, about 5 years old, and the storm was coming and blowing. My daddy and my mom was up in the field, but I had my little brother in the wagon. But my daddy said, push the wagon under the postmaster, and I listened again, and he said, push the wagon, get the baby out of the wagon, and put the baby on the post and drag the baby in, because I couldn't carry the baby, 5 and he was 3. And so I pushed the wagon under the house, and by the time my mama and daddy got to the house, the storm hit the house and tore the house up. My mama was pregnant with another baby. But however, daddy was saying, hold my leg, while he held my mom. And the house had a hole go through it. So the storm tore that part of the house, one part of the house down, over the flour and the meal and the syrups and the meat. Nothing got wet. But that side, it tore everything down. That just shows us how God can save what we need to have saved. But I want to also tell of another story that happened a few weeks ago. And it makes me sometimes just want to shed tears. How I didn't know what way. I heard this storm coming, the tornado. And I wondered what was rolling so hard. And the clouds were rolling coming too. So I was in the house alone on 1512 Leroy Street. But I said, Lord, help me and keep me. So the storm came and tore the house. I could see the rafters pulling apart and floating in the air. And then I heard the windows cracking and the curtains flying up in the air. And so I couldn't do anything but just cry and ran behind the door. My mind was saying go under the bed. But another spirit said, no, if the house fall on them, they won't find you. Then I started to go in the closet. But a spirit said, no, don't go in the closet. So I ran behind the door. When my children come in from school, they just kick their shoes off behind the door. And I stooped down, and I heard another voice calling, said, Miss Smiley, Miss Smiley. And at that time, the storm had hit the house and gone on over. But I looked at the door, and there was a little white guy. And he wanted to say, hand me your hand. I'm going to carry you on through. He said, don't pull loose. I'm not going to hurt you. And so I didn't pull loose. So he helped me and carried me to my neighbor's house. So God is good. And he will always carry us through. All we got to is listen to the voice that's saying, calm down. I am here for you. And God never leaves us. He never forsakes us. Yes. Amen.
We have she shares a photo of Miss Smiley's house. I'm going to send it to you guys so you can put it up on the screen. I want people to see this. Now, I don't want to be rude. I was told, Malika told me your age. I don't know if you want me to say it. You want to tell people your age? Do you want people to know your age? Your age.
I'm 91 years old. I was born April the 6th, 1931.
Thank you for your courage and your story. Reverend Patterson, just go ahead. If you want, I cut you off. Go ahead, and then I want to hear from Sister
Oh, that's
Jubilee.
fine. I don't
Share
get,
that with you.
get the opportunity to be on a panel a lot, so, you know, I'm trying to take advantage of it. But what I was wanted to say was, neither one of these individuals that came, are you all college educated? Well, I have like 3 years of college. Okay. Well, they're not rich, that's what I'm trying to say. They work hard and they share their wealth with others, and they try to help their communities, both of them, in whatever way they can. And that's why I invited them here tonight. It's not about status or even though she's an elected official, but she was willing to come tonight even though she worked all day. And we just thank God for having people like these that can tell their stories. And that's what we need here in Selma, because there's many difficult stories that are untold. That's right. The underinsured and the ones that don't have insurance, but sometimes they're not insured to the value of others. That's right. And it's going on right here. We have homes being built a week after the tornado, while others are not even been written off. That's right. And it's happening in our communities. Others are more worried about the country club than being hit by the tornado than residents on other parts of the town. And I'm the chairperson in Selma with the Poor People's Campaign, and we're working to solve some of these poverty issues. And we just want to bring light to the fact people are being marginalized, even though they may have money, but they may not have access to some of the things that others have access to. And part of this tornado coming through showed us that we did not have an organization amongst us with all races, a VOAG. We were caught with our pants down, the surgeon that said it at the United Methodist Church that we met. And we weren't prepared for this. No one, no matter what color, race, or who you were, we weren't prepared. And part of being prepared is being organized. And that's what we need to do, come together and organize for everyone can have a seat at the table. And I told them I may not have the same skill set that others may have to be for the long term, but I may have the skill set to do what I need to do right now to help the people. And we started, my denomination, they trusted me to be the AME denomination trusted me, my bishop trusted me with the funds to be able to go door to door and deliver gift cards immediately after the tornado hit. They used my Cash App. And I have developed the application and a sign-in process just like any other person would for accountability. And it's very organized. People can attest to that if they come through, but because it's only by the goodness of God that He gives us strength to serve others. And that's what I wanted to say, and service is very important. And I thank Bishop Barber for being able to come to the church on tomorrow night, which is going to be exciting.
To give everybody details while you have the floor, what time is that?
It's going to start, we got events starting at 3:30 to 5 o'clock, which is a training process, and it's open to everyone, and there will be refreshments and food, but he's going to show up at 5:30 to 7:30 for a mass meeting, and I have flyers, and I was even looking for people to pass out flyers to help with the process, and Bishop Barber was able to pay some of the people that were hit by the storms to help pass out flyers. And this thing is real, and we are real people, and we serve a real God, and we thank you for your service, and we pray that you come out and celebrate with us during this time.
All right, thank you, Reverend. Don't go anywhere. You've been very patient. Not trying to put you on the spot, but I wanted you to have an opportunity to hear so you could react, and we have other panelists as well. So be sure to let everybody know your role and who you were here representing. I don't want to mess it up. Please.
Good evening. My name is Sharon Dooley, and I'm a Public Affairs Specialist with U.S. Small Business Administration, Office of Disaster Recovery and Resilience. I know that's a lot to swallow, so I'm going to say SBA. And so I want to thank Reverend Thompson and Reverend Barber for allowing SBA to share their panel to give you some information. I want to let you know what we do in times of disaster. In times of disaster, SBA comes out and to help with your long-term recovery. We offer low interest, long-term fixed rate loans to homeowners, renters, businesses of all sizes, and most nonprofits. So that includes museums and houses of worship. The interest rates for homeowners and renters is as low as 2.313%. For businesses, they're as low as 3.305%. And for nonprofits, as low as 2.375%. Like I said, they are long-term. So when I say long-term, some of these loans can be up to 15 to 30 years. That's long-term, okay? What we do is we offer two types of loans. We offer physical disaster loans to the businesses, the renters, and homeowners. So I'm going to start with those first. For physical disaster loans, renters may qualify for up to $40,000 to replace their personal property that was damaged due to the recent storms and tornadoes. And that is like their clothing, their furniture, even a vehicle that may have been damaged during, the disaster. For homeowners, they may qualify for up to $200,000 to repair or replace their physical damage to their home. And on top of that, they may also qualify for an additional $40,000 for their personal property, their clothing, the furniture, and a vehicle that may have been damaged. In a further effort to help us, Selma, build back strong and better, homeowners may qualify for additional 20% of their verifiable damage to their home for mitigation. That is to put in storm windows, to put in a sump pump, to do grading away from your house, to build back better and stronger should a disaster of this type happen again. Businesses may qualify for up to $2 million to replace their building, their structure, their equipment, or in their inventory that may have been damaged. And they also may qualify for an economical injury loan, what we'll say EIDL. And that's they may not have had physical damage, but they lost power. Or trees, when I first came out, trees were everywhere. So their patrons couldn't get to their business. So they are losing revenue. So that's an economic injury loan. So they may qualify for that. Now, the deadline to apply for the physical disaster loans is March 16th. Again, the deadline to apply for physical disaster loans, so it's March 16th. So we ask you all to apply. No cost to apply. Ever, there's no cost. What we do ask if you're applying for a physical disaster loan, you have to have credit history satisfactory SBA, and that's less stringent than the normal financial institution. So saying that our credit score is a little bit or even somewhat less than what a normal financial institution will require. You have to have the ability to repay the loan. And then you have to obtain and maintain any type of insurance that is required. So if it's a home, it's a homeowner's loan. If it's a building, a commercial loan. If you're in a flood zone, flood insurance. You have to do that. So any loans over $25,000, they do ask for collateral if it's available. They like to use real estate. If you don't have real estate and have other assets to offset that loan, SBA will work with you on that too. That being said, if you do not have the collateral, that does not mean that you will not qualify for a loan. I'm trying to get everything in, make sure you guys, I want you to have all the information you need. If you are approved for the loan, you have 60 days after you receive your loan approval to sign the loan documents. You can take all of the loan that you've been approved for, you can take some of it, or you can take none of it. It's up to you. What we're here to do is to cover the gap between the uninsured and the underinsured. Sometimes people have insurance, but you may have $100,000 worth of damage. And when your insurance claims come through, they say they're only going to give you $30,000. So SBA can cover that gap. What we can't do is we can't duplicate benefits. So if you register with FEMA and FEMA gave you $25,000 on that $100,000 damage, and your insurance company came and gave you another $25,000, SBA can cover that gap of the $50,000. You don't have to wait to apply for SBA, apply or be approved for SBA loan for your insurance claim to come through. What you're saying, if you apply and approve by taking that loan sometimes it does come through before your insurance due. By signing those loan documents, you are pledging to pay SBA back the difference when your insurance claim comes through. Okay. We have several ways to apply. We have a PLOC, what we call it, a portable location at the bottom of the bridge tomorrow. We are also, myself, I will be located in the Wellness Village. We have a table there to assist, people that may want Community Center. Then we have another one on Broad Street, which is at the Dr. Michael and Catherine Bullitt Community Center. I've been told by the locals it's called the Edmondite Community Center, so we have one there. We also have a business recovery center located at 2300 Summerfield Road, and that's at the Gospel Tabernacle Church there, and that's Pastor Grayson's church there. So we are there. I want to make sure I'll cover everything. So that's all. Oh, and a further effort to show that SBA is dedicated to helping Selma build back and build back stronger. SBA has waived all interest on these loans for the first 12 months. So it's 0% interest for the first 12 months, and they have deferred the first payment until 12 months after your initial disbursement of these loans. So, and we are here. Like I say, I want to stress this point to homeowners and renters. If you receive a referral from FEMA, please do not throw it away saying, because nobody knows your financial situation more than you do. You may think, well, my credit score may not be high enough, or I can't pay it back. Let SBA decide that, because if we can't help you for whatever reason, we automatically refer you back to FEMA for other grant consideration. But if you skip the middle step, which is SBA, then you limit your options, because you do not get to go back to FEMA, without coming, without us referring you back that second time. If you receive a denial letter from SBA, please read it thoroughly, because sometimes a denial is not a true denial, it's a not right now. Because you may need to submit more documentation. Or it could be something as simple as somebody transposed the numbers. Your address could be 1050 Davis Avenue, and it was written down as 5010 Davis Avenue. So that's something so simple. Or your name might be Catherine Davis, spelled with a K, but somebody sitting down at a computer spelled it with a C. So like I say, it's something so simple as that. Now you can go to the disaster recovery centers, or you can apply online at disasterloanassistance.sba.gov, or you can call us at 1-800-659-2955. If you have a hearing
do
or
that again
speech
real slow.
impairment.
Anybody need to write that down? Say that again.
Okay. If you have a hearing impediment, you can dial 711. Again, you can go to one of the disaster recovery centers. There's one at the Felix Heights Community Center. There's another at the Ebonite Community Center. Or you can apply online at disasterloanassistance.sba.gov, or give us a call at 1-800-659-2955. If you have a hearing or speech impediment, you can dial 711. Thank you guys for listening.
I just wanted to jump in and add some pieces, add a piece to this. I want to give a shout out to Legal Services of Alabama and the Alabama State Bar Volunteer Lawyers Program, because all of this stuff that we're talking about, and I want to give a shout out to SBA and FEMA, because when I say you've been at the Edmondites, you've been at Felix Heights, you've been at various churches, y'all have been present, and you have, and I just want to say thank you for SBA and FEMA. But so for the people that are having trouble filling out some of this, because she just gave a lot of information. That's a lot to go through to try to do by yourself. But I just want to say the lawyers are checked in, and Legal Services of Alabama, I don't see nowhere if Attorney Petaway is here, Felicia Petaway, but she has had law clinics from all around the state coming in. So Legal Services, if you say, look, I just want that stuff, but I don't know how to do everything that she just said, Legal Services will walk you through your SBA application. They will walk you through your FEMA application. They'll walk you through appeals. They also have additional clinics helping you, because what people don't understand, if you were renting and now you've moved on, you're trying to get money, trying to live, you're not thinking I need to cancel my lease with my landlord. And in Alabama, eviction law, damage is not an excuse for non-payment of rent. So you may work all of this kind of stuff out, but because you never stop to get out of your lease with your landlord, if you don't have a good landlord, that landlord may say, you still owe me rent for these pieces. So legal services is helping people get out of leases with their landlords. So I'm just preaching to everybody, either get to the Edmondites on Wednesdays. I think it's not anymore. Monday through Saturdays, get there where you can get to SBA. But the Alabama State Bar Volunteer Lawyers Project has attorneys there. They're volunteering from all around the state to come help people work their way through these issues. And Legal Services Alabama is on Alabama Avenue back here behind the county courthouse. You can just go in and say, hey, look, I need some help with all of this. They will walk you through all of the things, including the landlord-tenant eviction, all of that kind of stuff. So shout out to SBA, to FEMA, to Legal Services of Alabama, and to the State Bar Volunteer Lawyers Program, because they are resources to help people navigate this and get all of this done. Thank you.
Amen. Thank you for that. Some powerful messages. Some of the other panelists, but I just want to, for the record, is there anyone else here who has been impacted by the storm? Or is anyone here who has a question for the SBA? Okay, I want you to hold that for a minute, so don't go away. Bishop Barber's coming to the door in a minute, too. I want to just put a comma here on this specific issue. It is a tradition during the public conversation, as with all other events. I mean, this is the birthplace of voting rights. We need to talk about that. Two of our comrades are here, and they're welcome to comment on the matter at hand, too, because to some extent, these things end up being related. You don't have voting rights and voting power. You aren't able to put people in office to help you get the resources you need in a crisis like this. So we're first going to hear from our comrade, Virginia K. Solomon, at the League of Women Voters. And she's going to talk to us about how they view the state of voting rights in America, here in the birthplace, since we're in the birthplace, and what they're doing to deal with that. And then we're going to hear from our brother Jared, who's with Legal Defense Fund. The two constants over probably the past 25 years in Selma have been, I'm proud to say, me coming and a Legal Defense Fund. We got hooked up here. They're here every year. Every year. Sister Cece is here. She said, we're coming. I said, I know. I had no doubt about it. Folks like, you heard from Legal Defense? They're coming. Don't worry about it. They're always there. So Joy Reid is going to be on their panel tomorrow. Amen? So he'll give you details on that, Brother Jared Evans. But first, Virginia, League of Women Voters. Let's give her a round of applause, if you would, please.
Thank you, Reverend Mark. And I just have to say that it is with humility that I get to be here. My first time in Selma for the Jubilee was last year. And it was such a transformative moment for me as an organizer. I've been an organizer for 30 years almost. But by my accent, you could tell I'm from up north. And so this for me was, like I said, just such a transformative moment. I'm with the League of Women Voters of the U.S. And when I was hearing your stories about, my family is from Puerto Rico. And so hearing about the devastation that you faced, it's so eerily similar to me from the hurricanes that have happened in Puerto Rico and the damage that has been done, the devastation, and how there was nobody there to help. That people came, the cameras came, they took photos, and people are still, in some cases, living with tarps as roofs 3 years after Maria. So I will say that the only way that people have been able to get relief is through organizing. So I would just encourage you, the power of organizing, as you all know, in the heart of the civil rights movement, this is the heart of this country for making and creating change. And so I would just encourage you to engage in much as organizing and being as loud as possible. I think sometimes we forget that we can be loud. We tend to accept what people are giving us, and we forget to use our voices and be loud without shame. the past few years, people have expected us, I think, to ask for things nicely. Because they say these are woke politics, right? That we're in a culture war. We're not in a culture war. I reject the idea of a culture war. This is a war about truth and justice. It is a war about education. It is a war about history. It is about civil rights and human rights and dignity. And so when they talk about it being a culture war, and all this stuff is connected, and so, I know I'm here to talk about voting rights, but voting rights is at the middle of that. It is very much at the center of it still. And so I want to pay thanks, especially to the elders of the movement who have given so much of their lives to this work, and honor the work that you all have done. When we talk about the state of voting rights today from the national level, I will say, Terry Sewell, you have a champion in Congress. When I say a champion, I have worked with Representative Sewell. She is there, and she is one of the most passionate leaders that I know. And I'm not supposed to endorse or support candidates. We are nonpartisan, but I can tell you that as a partner in justice and somebody who comes always putting Selma first, she is that person. And so she is going to be reintroducing the John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act. There is plans in another week or so to reintroduce the Freedom to Vote Act. Those are both obviously very important pieces of legislation. They were introduced last Congress, they were passed in the House, and they failed in the Senate because of the filibuster, and because you had 2 Democratic senators who refused to vote to remove the filibuster as an impediment to passing these critical pieces of voting rights legislation. So everybody who says they are for voting rights is not necessarily for it when it comes down to doing the things that are necessary. But this Congress has changed. You currently in this Congress have 150 election deniers in Congress between the House and the Senate right now in this moment. We have 39 people in the House who actively participated in January 6th. These are people who are QAnon members, election deniers, and people who have actively engaged. And so I want you to understand that it's not that there is not political will to move legislation, but it is very much the reality that there is a hostile Congress in place right now, people who are hostile to any kind of voting rights legislation advancement. So although these pieces of legislation will be introduced, the likelihood of them passing is very, very slim. But there are other good things that are happening. So you have the Electoral Count Act that did pass, which will fix some of the pieces of some of the things that happened around January 6th to prevent them from happening again. There's also the Early Voting Act that just was introduced, so that people in states who don't have early voting, it would make it possible for them to have that. Now, while those are not two comprehensive solutions, they are a beginning. And there are other smaller pieces of legislation that we can look at the federal level to try and pass this pieces incrementally between now and the next Congress. However, and this is where the good thing is, in the states, there are state voting rights acts, John Lewis voting rights acts being introduced in states all around this country right now. For example, in New Jersey, there is an incredible piece of legislation that is close to being passed. You have voting rights that are being restored for former offenders. You have early voting that is being passed in states around the country. So the states are on the forefront of passing critical pieces of voting rights legislation right now. Now, this goes back to why do we see, but we also see attacks. I was in Arizona just 2 weeks ago, and in one day they dropped 35 bills, anti-voting pieces of legislation. You all, Alabama here, you know all too well what those attacks look like. We see what's happening in Georgia. We see what's happening all around the country in Texas. And I want to say, don't despair. While it may feel like you just want to scream, The reason they are doing this is because we have been winning. It may not feel like it, but we have been winning in state after state after state, and they see the power, the collective power that so many of us have, and they fear that. They see the organizing that has taken place around this country, and they fear that. And so what we need to continue to do is organize, organize, organize. And I know that it's exhausting, but those person-to-person communications, making your kids come with you to vote, forcing your kids to register to vote. My kids know they can't come to Thanksgiving dinner if you didn't vote. Like, we have to create reasons and incentives. And it's not all about sticks. There needs to be carrots as well. And so when we talk to young people in particular, young people, when we saw the increases in voter turnout for young people won many seats that should have been lost this past election. It was young people who did that. They showed up at the highest rate ever in the history of midterms. There should have been many, many more seats that were lost by Democrats. Remember, they were saying it's going to be a red wave, and it was like a red dot. They only have 4 seats in Congress, in the House, and potentially 3 in a moment with the investigation of George Santos. But it was young people. And so I encourage you, as you think about how you engage with young people right now, it's talking about criminal justice reform. It's talking about education. It's finding ways to meet them where they are at, what is important to them, and being able to connect those dots and make those connections. And so while I know it's not all the things that we would want to hear, I just encourage you to be hopeful. And many of you have been part of this fight for a long time, and you know that this is not a sprint, it's a marathon.
Amen.
And this is work that is going to continue beyond us. But we will be able to win.
Thank you. Virginia K. Solomon, thank you so much. Senior Policy Counsel from LDF, Legal Defense Fund, Jared Evans, give him a round of applause, and he'll tell us about
Thank you.
their all-important panel tomorrow. Please, Jared.
Thank you so much, Reverend Mark. Good evening, Selma. I bring you greetings on behalf of our President and Director Counsel, Janae Nelson, and the entire NAACP Legal Defense Fund. I'm very honored and privileged to represent LDF here tonight. We represented the foot soldiers on Bloody Sunday. We represented the marchers from Selma to Montgomery. And here we are 58 years later. LDF is still representing black voters here in Alabama. We are lead counsel on Maryland versus Milligan, which is a case to get the state of Alabama 2 black congressional districts. And Reverend Mark, the issues that you've heard here tonight, you've heard these survivors tell their stories with such bravery and such courage, and they've spoken about the issues with infrastructure and fair housing issues and struggling to get access to resources. Where do you think all those policies are set at? All those policies are set in Washington. And the right to vote for black people, black and brown people in America, is under greater threat now than in any other period since the post-Civil War era, since Jim Crow. And the attack is from multiple places. Not only is the attack on early voting and reducing polling hours and closing precincts in black neighborhoods without notice, where black people have been voting for 10, 20, 30 years, and they show up with no notice and their polling site has changed. Not only that, but in the way that we are packed and cracked into districts. And we've heard my colleague up here talk about how wonderful it is, how great of a champion that Terry Sewell is. And if you've never thought how powerful your congresswoman is, if you watch the State of the Union, when President Biden walked into the chamber, to the House chamber, and you saw Terry Sewell right there, she said, "Mr. President, you should come to Selma. He's going to be here on Sunday." That's power right there. Do you know how many other people in this country would wish they had a congressperson that could have that kind of impact and influence? But imagine if you had 2.
Imagine if the black belt had 2 people champion your issues. Imagine if the black belt had 2 people in Washington fighting for you. Imagine if you had 2 Terry Sewells. What could happen? We are so thankful for Congresswoman Sewell and the work with FEMA and the SBA and the work that the federal government is doing here. But just imagine how powerful it would be if you had 2 more people. So very quickly about what Merrill versus Milligan, the issues there is Alabama is about 27% black. And the black community in the black belt is one of the most culturally rich, culturally vibrant, culturally cohesive black communities in America. Can we hear it for the black people of the black belt, please? And LDF, our clients here, that in, Alabama has seven congressional districts in the state. And instead of packing all those voters into one district, going up to Birmingham and getting those black neighborhoods there, coming on down to Montgomery, getting those black neighborhoods there, getting part of Selma, and then going down and getting Mobile, and packing all those voters into one district so they can't influence any others, what we proposed is to separate those districts so that black voters constitute a majority in 2 districts, and can send 2 people to Washington, and can have 2 Terry Sewells, and can have 2 people asking President Biden to come down here to Selma. We were successful at the district court level. We were successful at the appellate court level, and the case is currently pending in the Supreme Court. But Reverend Mark, I'm here to claim that this spring the court will rule in our favor, and Alabama will have 2 majority black congressional districts.
All right. Time and location tomorrow for your event?
We will be at Edmond Dyke Missions at 4 p.m. We will have a panel with Rashad Robinson, who's the president of Color of Change, Maya Wiley, who's the president of the Leadership Conference on Civil and Human Rights, Evan Milligan right here from Alabama Forward, and the panel will be moderated by none other than Joy N. Reed, host of the readout.
Amen. Thank you, Jay. Give him another round of applause. And again, what he's saying is how really, this is the birthplace of American democracy, but that's still an ever-evolving struggle. Democracy ain't over. We are still underrepresented in terms of members of Congress and the number of people. We need to have more, so we're thankful for that. Dr. Chavis is going to say a few words and kind of tie all this together, if he would. Dr. Barber is going to close us out, but let me just bring Dr. Barber up to speed. We've heard from several, first of all, give Dr. Barber a round of applause for being here. I know, we all know that's who you all love and really came to see, but we, Dr. Barber, have heard testimony from several impacted people, residents around here, including 91-year-old Miss Smiley right over there. Raise your hand, Miss Smiley, so Dr. Barber Bishop Barber can see you, whose house was affected. I want people to see the pictures of her house on the screen. You can see it right there on that screen, Bishop. That's her house, impacted by this tornado. You have the next one. Wires hanging all around the house. And she came to give us her testimony, 91 years old. Now, I'm not just doing this just to be doing it. There are individuals in very high places, i.e. the White House, watching this. And they have already informed me they want to reach out directly to some of you because of what they've heard from you tonight, okay? So be on the lookout for that, and that's a blessing. We did this for that purpose. We wanted people to see this. So you will be, hearing about this. I think Judge Perkins stepped away, but they want to see and hear from some of you when Biden comes here. My elder brothers here, 2 civil rights icons. First, Dr. Chavis, and it's always an honor to have him here in Selma for all of his hard work and what he has always represented. Please, a few words from the Reverend Dr. Benjamin F. Chavis, Jr.
Thank you. Well, I'm going to yield my time to my big brother, the Reverend William Barber. We're both from North Carolina.
That's right.
I just want to say to all of you, first of all, thank you for staying through tonight. I know it's been long, but we've heard some very important words, testimonies. First, from the victims of those who've been impacted by the tornado. We're so pleased that SBA is here from disaster relief. And we heard from our other panelists. And I know Reverend Barber is going to bring the word. Just let me say that Selma, some people ask, well, if God is in control of everything, why does God permit tornadoes? And it's okay to ask that question. But the larger question is, once a tornado hits, what do the people of God do? All right. You know, I don't believe that God is the problem here. Before the tornado or after the tornado. Judge said that the children of Selma are in trouble. And if the children of Selma are in trouble, before COVID, after COVID, before the tornado, after the tornado, if the children of Selma are in trouble, then the children of America are in trouble. The children of the world are in trouble. And if our children are in trouble, that means we got to do something to get our children out of trouble. Not something temporary, but something transformative. Something that makes a permanent difference. Reverend Barber, the Selma to Montgomery March, and we come back every year to commemorate it. But I really think there needs to be a Montgomery to Selma March. There's something going on in Selma that needs to be healed, that needs to be reconciled. And as our panelist said, the tornado just didn't touch black folks, it touched some white folks also. The question is, what are we going to do about it? I'm here tonight on behalf of the National Newspaper Publishers Association, the Black Press. I'm so glad to see the Zippets here from the Greene County Democrat, black newspaper in the Black Belt. Let's give them a hand. Still publishing. Also hit by the tornado. Greene County was also hit. So, right. But I'm glad Dr. Tony Brower is also here. I expect his work, expect his scholarship. And Dr. Brower, when I heard, we're reminded of the trauma that our people have gone through and are still going through. You know, it's a situation that we have to change in the world in which we live. We have to better inform one another, keep each other informed. But I think what Dr. Barber is doing in the Poor People's Campaign is that we also have to stay engaged. We have to stay organized. We have to stay mobilized. And I would just end on this point, something I've learned all my life. And I'm 75 now. And people ask me, well, Ben, what you want people to say about you? And I said, it's very simple. Just say I was a freedom fighter. Because if you're not fighting for freedom, you're never going to get it. Let me say that again. If you're waiting for somebody to give you some freedom, if you're waiting for some beneficence to fall that's going to really heal our situation, it's not going to happen. But the history of our people shows that when we stand up and work together and pull together and fight for freedom, we do make progress. And we move toward having to enjoy the blessings that God has given us as a people. The workshops today that we had earlier, Mark, reminds us that we are not a cursed people, we are a blessed people. But because of the trauma that we continue to face, sometimes we don't even recognize that we are blessed people or affirm it, because we allow the forces of oppression to change our narrative toward one another. We allow the forces of oppression to change our identity, even how we see ourselves. So I'm just going to sit back and wait for my big brother to come to give us the word that we need to hear to fire us up. And I want to thank all of our panelists for sharing what they've shared tonight. We got work to do, y'all. We got to roll up our sleeves and get to work. Change America and change the world in which we live in. We haven't come this far to even contemplate giving up, to even contemplate not fighting for freedom. God bless all of you. Let's fight for freedom.
I got to get Bishop Barber up. Can we talk after? Because we want to hear from some other people, some other impacted people. Is that okay? I promise.
I'm not impacted. I came here because I've got the solution he was just talking about.
Well, we'll get to you. I'm because I need to hear from John, but let's get Bishop Barber. Bishop Barber. Let's give Bishop Barber a round of applause for being here in Selma. And we shared with you what's gonna, yeah, you can stand up. Ward Chapel AME Church tomorrow at 5:30 is the program. Doors open at 5.
Good evening, good evening, good evening, everybody. Thank you all. We like to say this with me, forward together, not one step back. You know, I've been trying to get here from New Haven and then through North Carolina. Told Mark, I called him, and he said, we want to do this forum tonight like this. And I said, well, Repairs of the Breach and the Poor People's Campaign would be honored to co-sponsor it, to get this word out. Let's thank God for Mark Thompson, his consistent work. And so all over the nation, all over the world, people have been listening in. You know, there were some people who wanted to come here on Saturday. And some of us felt a need to write them and say a few things. One is, this is sacred ground, so it shouldn't be photo op ground. And if you're gonna come when the blood was shed, don't come the day before. And don't come to say how much you remember, you like what the people did in the past while you're working against them in the present. That's called hypocrisy. For somebody to come down here and then to give glory about the past. You know, there's a statement being that says there are folk who love dead prophets. And Jesus said that. I didn't say it, Jesus said it. He said it in Matthew. He said, you love the tombs of the prophets. You love the tombs of the prophets. And so what happens is when people want to come and say do the Freedom Trail, they want to come and nostalgic, make everything nostalgic, though it's back there, and then go right back from here, sit right on the pews in Brown Church where the blood stains have been are deep ingrained in the wood, and then get right back up to Washington, D.C., and for 10 years, through multiple administrations, we have resisted the Voting Rights Act being restored. Do y'all realize that? 10 years, 10 times 365. June 25th, 2013, I remember it being because when the Voting Rights Act was gutted, on June 25th, 2013, there was a senator in North Carolina that said, now that the headache has been removed, we can move forward. And while it was the Shelby case that gutted it, the worst case after the Shelby case happened in North Carolina. And we had to file suit within 47 minutes of that bill being passed. And it took us 4 years 1,200 arrests, 15 pro bono lawyers. We had to fight $6 million of the state's money being raised against us to eventually win and beat the worst voter suppression case after Shelby, because once the Voting Rights Act was gutted, pre-clearance was no longer intact, which meant bills could be passed and could be implemented. And then later on, if they were found to be racist, all of the action that the people made, having been elected by unconstitutionally constituted legislation, would still stand. We had to fight in the court, in the streets, in the suites, but it shouldn't have taken 6 years. Because if the Voting Rights Act was in place and pre-clearance was in place, those laws would have never made it through pre-clearance. Somebody told me today 100 bills have now been filed just this year in legislatures across the country. All this redistricting that they're doing would not be able to be done if the Voting Rights Act, Section 5 was in place pre-clearance. Now, there are those, even among us, who say, well, you don't those. So say the amendment say not in about more and vote some vote people for much was done. Yeah. Second Reconstruction. And then, Mark, he says a line you and I talk about all the time. He says, you need to understand this voting in a larger context than just for black folk. In fact, Dr. King never in any of his speeches talked about the main purpose of voting was to elect personalities. He said, give us the ballot and we will pass such and such a thing. It was always about policy, right? It was about representation, but it was about electing representation that would truly represent, right? But then he says at that sermon, and this is about 30 minutes before Viola Woosa, a white woman, was shot and killed, transporting black people back. Let's not forget James Reed was killed, Jimmy Lee Jackson, blood beaten, blood killed, blood shot. He said these words. He said, the greatest fear of the Southern aristocracy, that's the folk that control the money, is for the masses of Negroes and poor white people to form a political voting bloc that would fundamentally shift the economic architecture of America. That was his dream. This is 65, before 65. That was what he saw. What he saw. That was the commitment. And he knew, but he was saying that's always been the fear. He said it was the fear going all the way back to Reconstruction. It was the fear then. It's the fear now. Do you know even now, 1/3 of all poor people live in the South? There's not a state in the South that has under 40% of its people who are poor and low wealth. There's not a state in the South where under 40% of its people make less than a living wage. In the South. In the South, there's not a state from Maryland to Arizona that if you got 25% of poor and low wealth voters who have not voted to join together and vote in a block, they could decide every governor's race, every Senate race, and every presidential race. The South is not red, it's unorganized. Huh? Because there's been so much to do to divide us. The whole Southern strategy was to divide white and black, to make sure that that coalition never came together. Maybe sometimes these events, tornadoes and others, can drive us together. Can drive us together. Can drive us together. They better, because listen, you talk about Alabama, let me tell you, income, 2 million residents, 53% of the children. Notice at first I'm not even going to do the racial breakdown, I'm just going to break down the reality. 47% of all the women, 1.1 million. 60% of all people of color, 976,000. 37% of white people, 1.1 million. And oftentimes you will hear people who come in the room who are uninformed, and they say, well, the reason is white people are voting against their own best interests. Most poor white folk didn't vote for Trump. Most poor low-wealth white folk do not vote for extremists. I'm talking about what the data says, not what people say. They just don't vote. Because when you go and ask poor low-wealth people from Appalachia to Alabama, I've been in their homes, I've been in places, that they say they don't vote because nobody talks about poverty. Nobody talks about the poor. Nobody talks about the intersection between race and poverty, that the same people who are blocking voting rights are also blocking living wages. So they just tune out. There's this whole sleeping giant that's out there. Martin saw it. Others saw it. Quickly, Mark, if you look in this state right now, if you look in this state of Alabama, 420,000 people are uninsured. 36% of the census tracts in Alabama are at risk of being unable to afford water, afford basic incomes less than $35,000 a year. 29,800 tons of nitrooxins are emitted in Alabama. It's the leading cause of respiratory problems. The leading cause of respiratory problems. Almost 3,800 people are homeless every day in Alabama. In Alabama, you have to work 82 hours a week at the federal minimum wage to afford possibly a 2-bedroom apartment and eat meat twice a week. 948,000 workers make under $15 an hour, 51% of Alabama's workforce. So if we're gonna organize, we gotta organize this sleeping giant. We gotta find language that can bring this group of people. You say, well, everybody's not gonna come. Well, the Bible tells me you don't always need everybody if you can get a remnant. Amos chapter 5 says, God says, if I can get a remnant. And what we have to do is find, I was in Kentucky up in eastern Kentucky, and some folks said, you better not go up there, they're gonna kill you. I said, I know those folk up there. I said, that's the Hatfields, the McCoy, but that's also Ann Braden's country. It was one of the great white civil rights. I said, that's also my daddy's country. My grandfather was a coal miner in West Virginia and Kentucky. He fought with white and black coal miners in the 1920s. You don't hear people talking about that. They battled. Went up to eastern Kentucky on a Tuesday. Then we brought some people in from Louisville. And we put a map up and we showed all of the elected officials in the State House of Kentucky. And then we showed where they voted on LGBTQI, gay issues, where they voted on living wages, and the pensions of coal miners. There was a guy in the name, right? He said, well, I will be damned if they ain't been playing us against each other. He said, ain't nobody showed us that the same people up here telling us that they're trying to preserve the vote and protect voting fraud are the same folk allowing these companies to take our pensions. I said, they sure are. Now, what you gonna do about it? Now, what you need to know is those folk got together in 5 counties. Those 5 counties prior to had gone quote unquote red. They organized 3 of them, went different in the next election, and they put out an incumbent extremist, called themselves a Republican. They changed the outcome of the election by bringing white folk from helping folk to understand that when economic and social tornadoes hit us, that hits all of us. It hits all of us. And so we must remember that. We've got to find a way to say in this moment, and we said to some politicians that want to come here, if we have to have an all-out push on at least 3 things: voting rights, not only the restoration of the Voting Rights Act, and not the watered down one that Manchin got them to water down on, and then wouldn't even vote for his own compromise. We said in the Poor People's Campaign that all of the caucuses in the Congress, the black, vote for infrastructure, but not until we fix the infrastructure of our democracy. Huh? Now, we'll vote for the infrastructure, but since this is politics, right, you're not going to get our votes for infrastructure. That's what they did on the infrastructure side. Manchin and them said, we're not going to vote for anything till we get infrastructure, and then when they got infrastructure, they lied and didn't vote on the rest of the stuff. So at some point, you have to use your for COVID relief because people are dying. Amen. We had to. But 700 people are also dying a day from poverty and low wealth every day. About how we use power once we get it. Push from everywhere for voting rights, living wages. Do you know there are folk in Washington, D.C. that say this? Well, we might need living wages, $15 an hour, but they don't need that in Alabama. They could take something less. A regionalized living wage. And it could but we need an all-out push, voting rights, South. And anybody that's talking about all of that are not fighting for at least these 3 things, they not love. It's talk, but it's not love. When it went to the Senate, 50 Republicans and 2 Democrats, 52 people blocked 55 million people from getting a raise. And we cannot play with this truth anymore. Now we got a situation where the House is in another hand, and you have senators ought to pass it, and the push ought to be to say to those in the House that want something, you're not getting this. In other words, fight what's being said. It's not even about, you know, one of the saddest scriptures to me, I'm gonna close here. One, I'm gonna talk about a sad scripture, and then I'm gonna say one that gets in this book of Psalms. I think it's around Psalm 72 or so. Those are the ones that came, the sons of Ephraim, the tribe of Ephraim. Joseph, who was black, and the black woman who was the it says the sons of Ephraim had everything they needed to win in the time of battle, but then they chose not to fight. To me, that's the saddest scripture in the Bible. They had been bequeathed everything that they needed to fight, but they chose not to. This is why, Selma, you all can't let people come here and have commemorations anymore. When folk come to Selma, they need to see big signs of the issues that aren't unfinished yet, like all the billboards and everything. Right. Because the flip is another scripture, was often quoted in the civil rights movement, Hebrews chapter 10, when people were thinking about quitting. Who shrink back under destruction. But we are those who persevere unto the salvation of the soul. Now, faith is the substance of things hoped for and the evidence of things not seen. I just stopped by to ask you, do you know who you is? We in this room and in this space, and those be with us, but her children are with us. We are, and those be with us, but her children are with us. We are not to us. But those are not unto destruction. If we don't persevere, the soul of America will not make it.
The Reverend Dr. William J. Barber. A couple things, housekeeping. I don't want to prolong the program. Okay with that, or do you have a pressing need? Ms. Dooley is here. Bishop, before you go, a couple of people I need to introduce you to. So there is an event tonight. One thing about Selma, we come Jubilee, we stay up all night. This is Judge Perkins. This sister came up here, and this is an example. Now, Judge Wiggins, the presiding judge, Bishop, Freedom Singers, tonight, let me tell you where to go for the party tonight, for the gathering. Upscale Mag is everybody, 1306. Snick Freedom Singers, amen.
I woke up this morning with my mind stayed on freedom. Oh, I woke up this morning.
Whoa. Uh-huh. Walk, walk, hey. Up your mind.